Hi there, everyone. I hope you've had a good summit so far, and thanks for attending this final talk of the day, just before the Emerging Enterprise Emerging Technologies talk later on. My name's Peter Shi. I take care of Cloud Financial Management here at AWS APAC, and today I'll be talking to you about realizing business value on AWS. AWS has been quite fortunate in its ability to help customers migrate to the platform and grow on the platform. Last year, in 2018, AWS grew about 45%, reaching a $30 billion run rate business by Q4 2018. We've got millions of customers on AWS active users, and you hear some familiar names there as well, from the likes of Grab, DBS, Singapore Post, and many others. Now, as customers move on to AWS and use AWS, what you'll find and what we've seen is that customers find benefit from undertaking business cases and articulating the types of value they can expect to get from the platform. One thing we work with customers on is developing those business cases in order to A, benchmark where the current fleet and environment and IT infrastructure is at, what you're currently running and its purposes. B, articulate the costs that you might experience in moving to AWS. So both the migration cost initially and the ongoing running costs that can be made more efficient and optimized over time. But also articulating the types of value that you might be able to expect on AWS. And so the crux of today's talk is really helping you understand how we can help you in that process and the types of value other customers have experienced by using AWS. So I'll be covering why organizations move to AWS, different reasons and different value dimensions. I'll be talking about how organizations save money on AWS once they are adopting and using. I'll talk about how AWS can help you build a business case as well, and the involvement that you can bring in from our expertise. One area, I guess, that we've had a lot of experience in is helping customers migrate and understanding the lessons learned across the different customers and what you should watch out for on your migration. And finally, the next steps to get started on this journey. So first of all, why do customers use AWS? If you're already someone who's operating on the platform, some of these reasons might be familiar to you. Typically, we find most customers start from the cost conversation, which is realizing cost savings on AWS. The typical cost reduction that we see many of our customers enjoy is somewhere in the order of 10 to 30%. And the customers who really push it with regards to optimizing and making things efficient realize up to 70% savings as well. One customer, AdRoll, who is an ad tech company, lowered their fixed cost by 75% and their operational cost by 83% by leveraging the AWS platform. Quite quickly, after the initial cost conversation, a lot of our customers realize business agility benefits as well. And so that's greater developer agility and productivity, but also ability to innovate on the platform in ways that you're not able to in on-premises environments. So one example is Clemson University in the US, where they managed to spin up 1.1 million vCPUs within a single AWS region in order to do natural language processing and using deep learning to understand how computers understand language. And so through these experiences working with customers, we've distilled these reasons for moving to AWS down to a few value dimensions. And so we formed up a cloud value framework that tries to articulate in a clear way and quantify these types of benefits. So the first one is, of course, cost savings and cost avoidance. When it comes to cost savings, as I've already articulated, a good amount of percentage savings, typically 30%. But also, there's a lot of cost avoidance as well. So from an infrastructure management perspective, the earlier customer, AdRoll, one of their abilities, one of the areas where they saved in was they managed to manage their ad tech platform using 2 engineers as opposed to 8 engineers, being able to use 6 engineers worth of time on other value-adding activities. GE has estimated their total cost of ownership to have reduced by 50% through AWS. Another area is the staff productivity improvements that you can expect to get. This comes from many dimensions. As already mentioned, the number of engineers required to manage infra, it drops. But also, because of the greater resiliency of the platform, the amount of time your staff are sitting around potentially waiting due to downtimes is also reduced. And finally, because AWS has services such as CloudFormation, allowing you to develop infrastructure as code, that automates a lot of the activity around stacking and racking servers, and also saving a lot of productivity there. A software company, Sage, managed to save 500 hours per year purely from server configuration time because of this. We also see customers be able to benefit from operational resilience. And we think of operational resilience in terms of both server uptimes and also the stronger security resilience you have. Expedia has been able to run their workloads on AWS and leverage the multi-availability zone architectures in order to make sure they are operating with more uptime. And so if you're a bit new to AWS, what we have within each region and around the world, currently we have 20 regions and announced 5 new regions, is that it has at least 2 availability zones with operating on different power systems, different floodplains, different backup power systems as well. And so the likelihood of 2 availability zones going down is extremely low. And operating across 2 with failover makes your applications much more resilient. And finally, there's a huge benefit in the great business agility that you gain. Business agility comes in many forms as well. So one type of business agility is ability to expand into new markets at extremely low cost. For example, if you're running a local Singaporean business and you're thinking there might be market potential out in the US or Australia, for example, then it's in a matter of minutes that you can spin up resources and a replica of your environment in those other regions, simply by changing the region ID in your code. If you were to try to do that yourself, you'd have to hire data center engineers, security engineers, networking experts to build out a region for yourself in those other countries. I'll go into detail about business agility and all these different reasons in a bit more depth right now. So if we're talking about infrastructure savings, from a fundamental perspective, one of the reasons why you're able to save is because of this. First of all, say you have an area of your business that's expected to grow, and you forecast demand out over time. In order to meet this demand, traditionally you had to outlay a large amount of capital infrastructure in order to cater to that demand, often 1 to 3 years in advance because of the long procurement and provisioning times. If you were able to perfectly predict demand into the future, we'd probably be on the stock markets making a lot of money right now, because it's a bit hard to tell exactly how much demand you're going to generate. Quite often, it's not a perfect match to what you predicted. What AWS lets you do is fit your cost much closer to that demand. And what effectively that means is you eliminate the wasted spend of the difference between traditional infra and AWS infra. That additional spend is also a form of de-risked spend, because if your experiments overseas or if your expansion into new areas don't work out as well as expected, you can simply switch off those costs without having to deal with all the sunk costs of building something yourself. All that spare capital and money can be invested in different parts of your business that add greater value than sitting there idle in your data centers until the demand catches up. And of course, there's also lost opportunity as well. In the construction industry, one of the biggest costs is when equipment doesn't arrive at the time when you have your staff resources available to do the work. Similar in the world of IT, if your equipment doesn't arrive at a pace and your staff are forced to wait around, that's a lot of sunk cost and lost opportunity from an internal perspective. From an external cost perspective, you're not able to as well meet your customer demand. And what that blue line also does is it can cap your business's thinking around what's possible as well. For example, if your data centers are out of capacity and you can only serve customers at a certain rate, your engineers, your business teams will only think to do certain types of marketing campaigns and certain types of initiatives that may be much better revenue generating if you didn't have that mental constraint. And so what AWS lets you do is push up that opportunity line and push up the demand line, as well as meet that demand as well. From a productivity perspective, we've researched across many of our customers to understand what sort of productivity gains they have been able to realize. So the information here is just one dimension of productivity, and it's the infrastructure management capability of the organization that grows through adoption. So across 500 customers, the average amount of additional VMs that infrastructure managers are able to manage increased by 2x using cloud. The amount of storage managed across these managers as well increased by 1.8x. And that comes about in part because of the systems available on the platform. Like, for example, AWS Control Tower allows you to observe your entire fleet of infrastructure and apply policies according to your business needs. It's, of course, much more difficult to do if you have distributed systems across the world in an on-premises environment. Another thing to note is that the types of efficiency gain here grows over time as you invest in a platform and as your staff learn better how to use the platform. We saw a 3.3x increase between customers who are on AWS for 1 to 2 years versus customers who are on AWS for 3 or more years. Talking about operational resilience next. Benchmarking across customers as well, what we found was the total number of monthly incidents from P1, P0 infrastructure outages was reduced by about 43%. That reduction comes about due to factors such as being able to create high availability across availability zones, having automatic resource configuration and management using tools like AWS CloudFormation that spins up your infrastructure in a standard and tested way. Through AWS IAM, you're also able to centrally manage user policies and access permissions as well. And finally, from a security perspective, there are many protections on AWS available, and AWS has over 30 certifications and compliance accreditations as well. For example, AWS is ISO certified with 9001, 27001, 2717, and 2718 as well. It's HIPAA compliant for companies that have healthcare requirements, and it's PCI DSS compliant too. So traditionally, if you were trying to maintain all these compliances yourself, that's more company resources that need to be invested in areas that don't necessarily add core value to your business. On top of that, we have services such as AWS Guard Duty, and what Guard Duty does is it scans your entire environment for fairly well-known security vulnerabilities. AWS Inspector, again, can scan your whole environment at extremely low cost to understand if there are any gaps in security there. And so what we've seen happen in the world of cloud is customers have understood that cloud can actually help them operate more securely than if they were to do so on-prem. This is one of the reasons why Capital One, a large financial institutions services company in the US, adopted cloud. They enjoyed AWS's security stance and understood the value that it brings there. So with regards to downtime, unfortunately, it can happen on occasion, and the impact of downtime generally is very significant. So IDC estimates the impact of downtime across Fortune 1000 companies to be a total of about 1.25 to 2.5 billion annually. Per incident, they estimate anywhere between 500K to 1 million cost per customer. And similar numbers from the Ponemon Institute talking about security breaches and security issues. And so applying a factor of a reduction against these numbers, although typically for many customers it's challenging to quantify, and often during incidents they may not be quantified, but reduction in these numbers are material to customers who want to de-risk their operations. Now, a huge reason why customers use AWS, beyond cost savings, beyond resilience, is the business agility gained. You've got many dimensions of business agility. I've already talked about the ability to expand into other parts of the world, but also the value-added services on AWS allow you to do new things with your business that were previously not possible. For example, quite recently, F1 decided to adopt AWS and use AWS to analyze the data and telemetry collected from their cars from each race. So F1 cars, fun fact, if you didn't know, it produces about 3 gigabytes of data per race. And what they're using AWS for is using machine learning and deep learning and Amazon SageMaker in order to analyze that data and understand from a driver perspective, did they push the car too far and were they operating outside of what was reasonable versus are they driving well? And so that adds net new insights that they can add to their televised streams and provide to their customers to delight customers in a brand new way. If we're talking about business agility in terms of speed to output, there's also improvements that have been found there. So customers such as Unilever have found that they've been able to reduce their application development time for certain apps down by 70%. And part of that is because the cycle of application development typically contains things like requirements analysis, design, build, integration testing, and deploying. From a requirements analysis perspective, you saw in one of the earlier charts that AWS allows you to fit costs to what you actually need. Because you can do that, there's much less time and effort that needs to be put into the requirements analysis piece in the first place, because you no longer need to be as careful and as safe with regards to predicting demand. If you have low demand, you can have very low costs. And if you have high demand, you can adjust your costs accordingly. If I talk to the integration and test piece, AWS CI/CD pipelines and AWS services like Code Deploy help you get your products out into market faster. By standardizing those sorts of approaches, we've seen customers be able to shift from few deployments per month down to tens of deployments per day. And finally, from a maintenance perspective, because you have much of your infrastructure under one hood, and have all the value-added services, such as AWS Cost Explorer, to understand from a cost perspective who's spending what immediately within a few clicks. From a resource utilization perspective, you can see across your entire fleet how well my resources are being used. The amount of effort and time it takes to answer questions and maintain your resources is also much lower. Another example, if you happen to use AWS autoscaling, that can be used to automatically heal your resources if they go down. And so instead of risking potential downtime of your customers and sending engineers to maintain hardware, it will automatically come back for you as a free service. And so what that really lets you do is simplify the design and requirements piece, increase the speed at which you can build, test, and deliver, eliminate deployment wait time. So we've seen so many customers shift from a 3, 4, 5 months wait time down to a mere minutes and hours worth of wait time for new infrastructure. It reduces your maintenance costs, of course, as well, and also really de-risks your infrastructure decisions, because if you don't like it, doesn't work, you can just switch it off right after. So if we look at our customer data, across the same 500 customers we polled, their time to market for their new products and services improved by 18.8%. And as I've already mentioned, it really allows you to spend more time on coding and adding value and innovating and producing more products as opposed to managing your infrastructure. And so there are many organizations that have achieved real and tangible outcomes with these services and methods. We've seen customers locally, such as Pocket Math, be able to process 30 billion auctions per day on the AWS systems and scaling up and down as needed through load balancing and compute resources. They also are able to achieve a 60 millisecond bid process time, which is critical in the competitive ad tech market. We've seen customers such as Caro, a automotive services company, choose AWS because of the performance that it provides. And one thing you might find from AWS is it innovates at a very fast clip. And so last year, it released over 1,900 new services and features that based on customer asked. And so another customer that has been using AWS and enjoying the benefits is Globe. Globe is a large telecoms provider based out of the Philippines, and they service over 65 million customers, mobile customers, and 1.2 million retailers and distributors. They have a very large footprint on AWS, and their journey started around 2014. So over 2,000 EC2 instances, over 9,000 vCPUs, and 6.7 petabytes of storage. And so you can see the types of scale that the Globe is using AWS in. They've gone ahead and measured the business benefits that it has provided them. So first of all, they've realized about 30% in total cost of ownership savings, 15x in certain app performance, improved up to 99.99% uptime, and really pushed down the amount of time it takes to provision new infrastructure. So getting a bit more specific here, where did that 30% savings come from and where did the app performance come from? One thing they did was they migrated from the Oracle databases they had. They migrated about 10% of that footprint onto AWS Aurora Postgres. And immediately through that, they saw 4x improvement in performance and about operating that at 1/10 of the cost, partially because of the reduced licensing and reduced maintenance costs from moving out of Oracle. That alone helped them save about $1 million. Also from a staff performance perspective, productivity perspective, how they traditionally ran their call centers was across 31 different screens and interfaces that were not necessarily connected well, forcing their 3,000 call center operators to operate in a less than efficient way. Through partnering with Amdocs, a partner specializing in telecoms and call center tech, and also using Amazon Connect, they were able to drastically improve the customer experience and improve the ability for their call center operators to gather the right information from the right systems. So this types of digital transformation that Globe has adopted and gone through has helped them move from a 33% revenue share of their market to 56% revenue share towards the end of 2018. So let's talk about cost savings. As I might have mentioned at the start of the talk, I specialize in the area of cloud financial management. My bread and butter is helping customers realize savings. And so how do customers realize savings on AWS? I think we've already talked about this, which is effectively allows you to remove the over-provisioning that's forced onto you using on-prem infra. But also, AWS is, we're interested in the long term and partnering with our customers. Since 2006, we've reduced prices 72 different times. This is made possible because as more customers use AWS and as AWS grows, it's able to share its economies of scale with our customers, and our customers will enjoy price reductions over time, even without doing anything. Also, as new technology comes out, for example, the M5, C5, R5 family of instances, the new technology and instances are typically not only cheaper, so the 5 series are about 5–10% cheaper than the 4 series, but they're also more price performant as well. So the 5 series performs about 10–20% better than their counterparts in the 4 series. And so we have new technology coming out all the time that you can leverage and move on to enjoy better performance and costs. We have a wide range of different pricing models as well. So from a compute perspective, you can pay for it on demand, which is the type of payment you pay if you just switch on your resource. But if you've got resources that are production workloads that are stable over time, or say SAP workloads, you might consider reserving those and saying, I'm happy to commit to the platform in exchange for a discount. And finally, For the more advanced customers, there is AWS EC2 Spot. And what Spot is allowing you to leverage the spare capacity within our data centers at a very significant discount. So it goes all the way up to about 90% discount, and on average, you get about 75% discount. Recently, a Korean customer, Voost, uses a partner called SpotInst to receive about 50% discount on their fleet. In trying to help customers realize savings, I found one Indian customer who leveraged Spot to receive about 86% discount across their fleet. As you spend more on AWS, there's tiered volume pricing as well. So on S3, using EC2 reserved instances and several other services as well, the more you spend, the lower the rate becomes. So from your perspective, if you happen to be using AWS or you plan to use AWS in the future, there are a few things you can do as well. And so, first of all, it's really about matching your supply to what you actually need on your infra. And so sizing your resources down on migration can help a good amount initially, because, as mentioned, on-prem infra, you're forced to oversize. Switching resources on and off. So outside of work hours, it might surprise you to find that 70% of the week are non-working hours. Of course, that depends on how hard you work and how hard your developers work. But if you assume a 10-hour day, 70% of the week are non-working hours where your resources can be turned off, just like how you turn off the lights when you leave work. You can also scale to external customer demand. So you can meet your customer demand with very large single resources, or you can use auto-scaling and load balancing to scale your resources using many small blocks to cover the same demand. You can also lower the unit price. And so I've already talked about the 3 types of pricing that you can lower using compute: on-demand, reserved, and spot. But did you know there's also many different types of storage pricing that can be optimized as well? Just to give you an example, there's one type of storage, a very common type of storage, called EBS storage. And EBS storage is like a hard disk you attach to your compute resources. That EBS storage comes at a particular price, but if you don't need that high performance storage attached to compute resources, you can also put the files onto a service called AWS Simple Storage Service, S3. S3 currently has exabytes of storage on it and has I think it's trillions of objects on the platform, and it's priced at about 1/4 of the price compared to EBS. Now, a few weeks ago, we also released another version of S3, and that version of S3 is called Deep Archive. Deep Archive lets you meet your regulatory requirements and store long-term backup data and put it into archive for however long you choose to. Deep Archive relative to regular S3 is about 23 times cheaper. And so you can already see the massive difference. Firstly, a 4x discount from EBS, and then another 23x discount onto S3. So picking the right pricing model for the right need is important to be able to optimize. And of course, that ties perfectly in with picking the right storage class as well. And so from a business case perspective, when you're pricing up your resources, when you lift and shift onto AWS and you're running all on demand, what that price includes is the racking and stacking of your servers, the server itself, the power, the cooling, the maintenance, the security, the space rental, all included in one price. And you experience that at, say, 100% of the initial price. What you can immediately do is use some reserved instances or other methods of optimization to really trim down the price immediately once you feel comfortable with the capacity that you need. Again, that can compound with other methods of optimization. So if you size your resources down further, you're able to save another perhaps 10%. And finally, if you also apply elasticity and other methods of optimization, you can again trim that down by another 10%. So you can see, stacking together the different ways to optimize, you're really able to trim down your costs And this isn't even talking about serverless technologies yet. When I say serverless technologies, I mean services like Lambda, services like Athena, where you only pay for the time you actually run your code and script. There's a company in the US called Fender. They do guitar tutorials and other music-related services. They were able to increase their customer base by 22x over time on AWS, whilst reducing their cost by 15%. And that was made possible by leveraging the advanced architectures available to you on AWS and advanced services beyond the raw compute and beyond the raw storage services. And so, how can AWS help you build a business case and put it together? What the business case does, it really helps you agree across the business what makes sense, in what ways do you want to add value to your business, from a security perspective, from a resiliency perspective, from a cost savings perspective, and agree the path forward. And also, you get to learn from other customers their lessons learned by working with AWS. And so we have the process goes through a first call. So we have a call with the account manager, have a call with AWS experts to understand the scope of your work. Then there's a process of data gathering. What are you currently running? What advanced services might you be able to leverage? What you might change from an architectural perspective to understand that space. Then we do the analysis and refinement, working with your teams. And finally, if you need to present to decision makers in the business, or maybe you're a decision maker yourself, you can do it yourself, or you can leverage AWS to help you attend that meeting too. And so recently, we acquired a company called TSO Logic. And I'll let them speak for themselves what they do.
From planning your migration to AWS. TSO Logic's powerful platform ingests millions of real-time data points about your organization's environment, then provides accurate data-driven recommendations for right-sizing and right-costing workloads on AWS. Here is how TSO Logic can help you plan your migration with confidence and unlock significant cost savings. TSO Logic's platform communicates with data gathering and discovery tools that are common within most enterprises. Using the industry's most accurate data-driven algorithmic analysis, you can accelerate the planning process. Replace manual discovery and guesswork with real-time data and automation. We identify your compute, storage, and current cost of ownership. We then create a statistical model of capabilities, processor types, and utilization. Our algorithms select the best AWS instance, along with costs. Multiple scenarios for comparison can be created based on parameters you set, such as payment type and location. The platform then direct matches and right-sizes your workloads for AWS. By identifying your optimal instances, eliminate wasteful over-provisioning. And by leveraging the elasticity of AWS, you can save in excess of 30%. Your scenarios can create a multi-year business case, factoring in migration costs, discounts, and other assumptions. Then you can compare with your current costs to see the return on investment. Discover how TSO Logic can help plan and measure your migration to AWS with confidence and unlock significant cost savings.
So, how do we get started in this space? Without going into too much detail here, we encourage customers to get started by doing a migration readiness assessment. This is based off the thousands of customers our professional services team and our business value team has worked with in understanding from a people perspective, from a governance perspective, from a business needs perspective, what do you actually need and what there might be gaps, where there may be gaps in the business to invest in to make sure you have a successful journey. We have a dedicated business value team that can help you out. And if you need help in understanding or justifying the business case, definitely reach out to your account manager or myself, and we're really happy to help. There are a few resources to help you get started. Firstly, the TCO calculator helps you estimate directionally how much you might save going to AWS. There's a Cloud Economics Center with lots of customer case studies talking about how others have benefited from cloud economics and improved their economic standpoint. There are many case studies as well available from the case studies site and value realization studies as well. So just wrapping up, Data discovery is quite often the bottleneck of the process, so do that early and quickly. We have the tooling, resources, and expertise and experience to help you out on your journey. You can evaluate your business case from many dimensions, not just cost savings. And finally, if you want to optimize your costs, there are always ways to trim and push that further on AWS. Thank you very much for joining today.